All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining in. Um, Welcome to the Budget Lunch and Learn. My name is Nick Norimoto. I'm also here with our ANF leaders. We have Ryan Heredia, our interim AVP for Business and Finance, and of course, our CFO and Vice President of Admin and Finance, Deborah Wallace. Thank you all for joining. I hope you guys know we are recording this budget lunch and learn, and we'll work to make sure that the presentation and the video will be posted on our budget website. Let's get started. So today, as you know, this is a kind of a series of conversations that we have for budget lunch and learns on our campus to discuss the background and health of the budget here at CSUDH. Today, we are going to cover the California Governor's May Revise or the May Revision and the outcomes and implications of recent updates. Now, this may be like a something that we've heard a lot over the past few months, just the May Revise and the governor's budget. We're going to talk about the timeline just so that everyone's aware of on the budget side and what CSU and the chancellor's office is kind of dealing with as far as the budget timeline and the budget process. We're going to kind of review that. We're going to talk about the updates that we were given yesterday as far as the governor's budget May revision, and then kind of just implications and moving forward of what the budget team is working on right now. I did want to just plug that this is going to be like the last lunch and learn for this fiscal year. We've kind of been doing this a quarterly thing, and we'll likely continue, moving forward. We do know that this is a great way for the community to kind of learn specific topics for budget lunch and learns. I did want to plug again just the website for those that want to see this recording or previous recordings. In addition to lunch and learns, we have the quarterly reviews, our November town hall, and previous year's presentation lunch and learn. So please go to the website. You can access the video recordings or presentations online. So first, before we kind of get into the May revision and the updates, I wanted to provide this group just a brief and broad overview of what the budget timeline is. And we kind of went over this. I think we did a budget timeline last year. For those that missed it, just wanted to go over it again, as it is what you'll see is there's a lot of overlapping of years as we focus on certain things. And there's a lot of specific dates that the campus and the chancellor's office kind of has deadlines and what we are expecting. So there's on this timeline that we're going to go over, we're going to kind of go over what the state's perspective timeline is, what the system and the chancellor's office timeline is, and how that kind of goes together. And of course, based on the state and the chancellor's office timeline, what each campus is kind of going through, and basically our timeline of our own specific campus. So just remember the state's green, the chancellor's office is purple, and we're kind of the maroon burgundy color. So if we're talking about this fiscal year of 24-25, we began the year in July and we started off with our 24-25 budget. What we're going to go through moving forward in the timeline is basically that's kind of the end. The beginning of 24-25 is the end of the work that's being done for the 24-25 budget. And as soon as that's over in July, the work for the next fiscal year is already beginning. So even though we're in 24-25, this rest of the year is being focused on the next year of 25-26. How it starts is that even though the campuses are given their budget, Chancellor's office in July is already working to create a budget plan for 25-26. That means they are working on a budget request or specific things about what they plan on, how they plan on spending any additional dollars they hope to receive, or in some cases, like if there's going to be additional tuition revenue, what that will go to. In July, so all the July through September, the chancellor's office is working with the board of trustees and the chancellor and the leaders to create that budget plan. And finally, in September, it is finalized by our board of trustees. They review the plan and see what the budget plan is going to be for that next year, finalize it and approve it, and then it goes directly to the state of California. Throughout October, November, when the state is receiving all of these budget requests, in January, the governor comes out in mid-January and provides a governor's budget plan, a governor's budget. And that basically but what that basically entails is that based off of the requests that the state has received, including our own, in conjunction with just the financial outlook of the state of California, how the governor is going to balance the state's budget and how that all of that is going to impact the CSU. And we're going to go through kind of what those news updates was, but if in the last quarterly review, the news of the governor's budget plan was that the CSU was going to have a state reduction of 7.95%, about 8% of a budget reduction. In January, that's when we received the news. From January until May, there's legislative budget hearings, there's advocation, there's lobbying, a lot of discussion with the legislature, with the governor, with the chancellor, and a lot of just discussions about the impacts of the governor's budget plan and hoping that that will be changed in those months. And then by May, a revised plan will be released to the CSU of what that will look like. So they're like, based off of the work of the legislative hearings and all of that advocacy work, the governor's revised plan in May is something that we are hoping to receive, and we're going to go through what those revised plans are. And as we know, I'm not sure if everybody's aware, the plans have been revised. Back on the campus, and what we've been doing over the past 6 months, or even throughout the entire year, is developing university priorities, and also, depending on what the budget plans are within the state and the CSU and the chancellor's office, creating a budget request within our own leadership and university budget committee, our own shared governance and things like that, on how we plan on either spending new money or addressing budget reductions. And that's what we've been doing in the past few months, is how we plan on reviewing recommendations as far as how we plan on addressing budget reductions. Recommendations are done and are created within the University Budget Committee, within committees like the Reimagining the Future at CSUDH. There's different entities within each of the divisions. They're creating their own plans, giving those recommendations to our president and our executive cabinet, but really our president, to finalize and finally create a final approval of what the budget plan will be based off of the information that we're getting from the state, from the CSU, and things like that. If there are any questions, I guess we'll just have questions at the end, but I'm just going to continue on. So, and then what we're waiting for now is at the end of June, the beginning of July, the state's going to adopt their final budget, and we will basically start at the beginning. Then our campus will receive their final budget, and we'll know what the outcomes are. Deborah, Ryan, is there anything you want to add just before I move on as far as budget timeline? I know that's kind of a tedious, but this is really good information, is because we're working with the CSU, we're working with the chancellor's office, the state, on all of these different timelines, and making sure we get all the right information and using that information to, make plans at our campus level. Okay, great. Moving forward. So now we're going to get into the updates of as far as the May revision. For those that wasn't able to catch it, but the governor actually had a live stream yesterday at around 10:30 in the morning. It usually happens mid-May, where he provided an update to the public as far as the financial outlook for the state, and subsequently how each of the state agencies, CSU being one of them, CSU is part of the higher education state agency, but there's K through 12, there's all sorts of state agencies, but he also provided an update about basically where he's at as far as the California state and how that's going to impact all the state agencies. So the updates that he provided was, overall, what he said was that he's projecting a $12 billion shortfall for the state of California. Now, that's something that projections are continuing to be massaged just based off of income tax revenue, things like that, as far as how the state is receiving its money. But even with the fluctuations of the revenue collection, there's still a $12 billion shortfall that the state of California is having to consider, and how he plans to address that shortfall. With that, even though it's a $12 billion shortfall, the revenues were looking a little more positive, but still a huge, a very significant $12 billion deficit based off of the recent projection. Overall, the governor provided an update that he did balance a $321.9 billion state budget, and this includes that $12 billion shortfall as well. Just to put into perspective of what the CSU is in terms of the $322 billion budget, our total like system operating budget is around 8.5 billion, five of it being directly from the state of California, in which we receive the state appropriation. So $5 billion of the 322. In addition to that outlook or financial outlook, he did provide an update, just other impacts that could affect the moving forward, what it's going to look like in the next few months before the final budget is adopted in July. Federal impact being a huge one, with the tariffs and funding cuts being implemented and affecting the state of California. I do want to just say that before moving on to the next slide, and Deb and Ryan, you can add it to this, but that we are really focused on the $12 billion shortfall, as that is a huge, significant factor in moving forward on what the updates could look like in the next coming months and when we see the final budget in July. The governor had provided updates about how he's addressing the $12 billion shortfall, but it's still something that could impact and could change how the CSU is going to be affected moving forward. So that's just something that we want to focus on as well. Deb, anything else?
I think another thing that's going to be impactful too is they continue to look at the impact of what the fires and things did. So I know the governor's is still looking at that, shortfalls in the state, you know, Medicare and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that are swirling in the background as far as this financial outlook. So that $12 million shortfall, we don't know if it'll grow, even though we anticipate additional revenue in. It's still not, if you look at that number, there's still going to be a negative, a deficit there, either way you slice it, even if those projections of the almost $8 billion comes in. So there's other things that I know he still needs to, for lack of a better word, reconcile with the state, in order to make sure that he's funding things in anticipation of next year, because the climate change is real and it continues to burden states with the things that they have to do in order to not only mitigate but do things like support persons that were impacted by some of these devastating tragedies that are happening due to climate change.
Thanks, Deb. So here's a kind of realize kind of a complicated slide, but I just want to provide a table and to show kind of the updates that we've seen in respect to the news that we received yesterday in comparison to the January budget update that we had just a few months ago. So the governor's budget here on this first column is what I did provide this kind of update in the last quarterly meeting. Here's the resource for those that wanted to look at the language that the state released. But overall in January, they announced, as far as the governor's budget plan was, that they were going to reduce the CSU's budget by 7.95%. That was equivalent to a $375.2 million reduction to the CSU's budget. So I mentioned that our apportionment of the state budget is about 5.5 billion. that would be reduced by 375 million. Based off of the January's governor's budget, the chancellor's office released that the DH proportionate share of that cut would be roughly around $12.1 million. So based off of planning, we were planning for a $12.1 million cut to our budget in the 25-26 year. The May revision budget in the far right column now, and again, here's a link to those that want to see the language of just what was released. Based off of the financial outlook that we had just talked about, the governor amended and revised the reduction from 7.95% to a 3% budget reduction. So the reduction would be planned would be a lesser amount. Equivalent in that dollar amount, instead of 375, our budget would be reduced instead by $143.8 million to the CSU. Now, since we did receive the news from the chancellor's office that our cut was our share was 12.1 in the January budget, I will say the chancellor's office did not give us a number yet on what this new plan would be. However, just based off of the estimation that we received, we estimated that our revised reduction for our campus would be 4.4. So basically a reduction in our reduction, so 12.1
Yeah.
to 4.4. Excuse me. So in addition to that update, our reduction being less, the governor also provided an update on the compact. Now, for those that aren't familiar, the compact was a 5-year deal that the CSU had with the state of California, in which the state of California would invest in the CSU, providing a 5% increase for 5 years. Now, that occurred for the first 2 years, and just with the climate of the state of California, that had been off the table, and talking about deferring that dollars into the future. Now, that's something that the governor did also say again in yesterday's update, is that the 25-26 compact deferral in the amount of $252 million is still planning on to defer it 2 years. Now we can, we take that with a grain of salt, to be perfectly honest, just because we don't know what the financial outlook is going to be in the state of California. A deferral does not mean money in our hands, and it's not something that we can automatically rely on. So although it is an update nonetheless, it's just something that we have to be very careful about relying on for sure. But overall, it is, I would say pleasantly good news, good news. I think when we're talking about our sister campuses, like, we've been planning for this 8% reduction. However, the reduction is less. However, and we're going to talk about this moving forward, that although the reduction is less, what that means for our campus and what that means for the CSU, just moving forward. Okay. Oh, Deb, anything you want to add as we're going to talk about and then the next slide, we're going to talk about still some unknowns. So but before we move on to that, Deb, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, no, I think this is fine. I think if I'm, thinking what others are thinking, it's probably, what does this mean?
Yeah.
And so the numbers are the numbers, but I think behind that.
Like I was literally sitting in the bathroom for.
Could you all make sure your mics are muted, please? Thank you.
Okay, great. So moving on to, yeah, I think as far as that question of, like, what does this mean? We're gonna first review kind of just still a lot of things that are unknown, and still things that are gonna be happening in the next couple months before we get the final budget in July. So we are still awaiting the chancellor's office review of the May revise. They got this information same as us, they got it yesterday. luckily, we have this budget lunch and learn to provide kind of an update of what we know. But the chancellor's office is still reviewing this information and how that will change as far as the budget moving forward. So we're still awaiting just their review and any kind of recommendation, instruction, just implications of what that means for all the campuses. Something that's really huge and that's still unknown is just from now until June, it's going to consist of a lot of discussions within the state, within the Assembly and the Senate. And all of those discussions may include numbers being thrown out between the CSU, between the state, between these governing bodies, and will impact the final budget. I will say, like, just I met with the chancellor's office yesterday, and they really want to harp on that. There's going to be a lot of numbers going to be thrown out, and what will have to happen in the end is the state will have to agree and have a final budget deal based off of these discussions. So this is, again, very important, because if you think about what happened this time last year, when we had the May revision, there was huge discussions between May and June, and our final budget changed drastically. So all we can say is that there's a possibility that this May revision is just a revised plan. The plans could definitely change in the next coming months. One of the factors, again, is how will the state manage the $12 billion deficit? Is that going to impact the May revision? The state financial outlook beyond 25, 26, just talking, things like the compact. A lot of these factors, I know, will impact how the final budget will land and what that final budget deal will be in July. So again, what does this mean for the CSU and CSUDH? When planning this presentation, what we wanted to just emphasize is that we're going to stay the course about the planning, and that even though that we have these new news, we believe that the CSU and our campus should stay the course in making sure that we're going to continue to right size this campus, review its budget, review its spending, making sure we're closing any gaps that we are still trying to recover from. What this means is we're going to have to wait until July, until the final budget occurs, until we get a final updated number, what the final reduction will look like. And then also too, just something that we would hope to have in the future is, of course, any one-time allocations from the state. And that's something that's really unknown. It's something that we, as a CSU, as a system, and our campus, they've in the past have invested one-time money into things like deferred maintenance and to making sure that we are updated as far as infrastructurally. So there's a lot of unknowns, but the thing is that even though we have this new update, we want to make sure we're going to continue to right size the campus and stay the course with the plans that we have. Do you have anything you want to add to this?
No, I think it's a good time to interject, though, that this new reduction amount has been an outcome of all of the advocacy that is happening in the state. I know a lot of our unions have been represented up in Sacramento and even in Washington, D.C., to really talk about the impacts of what these cuts are going to do. But I will say our work is not done here. We're going to continue to advocate. We're still meeting with district folks, the district leaders that have impact in our respective areas, and we're going to continue to push for zero cuts. While we met some of the goal is still not met. We want to get to zero cuts in the CSU, and we will continue to keep our foot on the gas in order to make sure that we are advocating for education in the CSU. So that's kind of where we are. We want to thank the governor for his acknowledgement, but we still want to make sure that the gap that the CSU has is acknowledged, because we still have a significant gap in our mandated costs, in what is needed to operate successfully these campuses. And so we will continue to fight. So you all, this is not, oh, we get a breather. We want to continue to push him to work with his folks in the legislative, amongst these legislative bodies to make sure that we get zero cuts this year. And, you know, the compact, if we get the compact, I don't know what he's going to do moving forward because this is his last year in office. And so the deferral of the compact is of great concern for campuses because we don't want to spend money that we might get. That's not the way to balance budget. So again, I want to thank everyone on this call. I know a lot of folks on this call have been instrumental too in making sure that we send letters, we contact our legislative officials that represent our districts and things like that. But the work is, there's still a lot of work to be done to get to the zero cut. So I thought it was a good time to interject that because I think that was important. This has come off the heels of this small gift has come on the heels of a lot of advocacy and a lot of people supporting higher education in the CSU.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ted. Just a few more slides that we want to just make sure, you know, the campus community is aware of as far as things that we're still focusing on and things that impact our budget. Kind of just going back to what Vice President Wallace said as far as, you know, our current gaps and things like that, is that we want to make sure that our focus is right sizing the campus, that we are spending, you know, in the sense of we are spending in the appropriate amount of what we we're given. And when that kind of goes to enrollment too, like with the amount of students that we're enrolling, and in turn the revenue that we're collecting based off of that, we're spending against that as well appropriately. We do not want to spend more than what's in our actual budget. And if we were to see, you know, see a reprieve or some kind of, again, a gift of lessening our reductions, like how can we very much be strategic and smart with that reprieve and making sure our focus is still on right sizing and making sure that we're spending dollars in the appropriate way. I do just, again, impacts to budget in addition to enrollment and just our spending, just the commitments and CSU priorities. That is something that is always in discussion and always something that could play a factor in on our cost. And that's something that we have to take into consideration, that if, you know, budget does appear, funding appears, that we are also focused on addressing any unfunded priorities or compensation commitments in the future. And just to kind of conclude on the timeline and what our campus does and how we take this information as far as the May revision, with the mandatory, you know, when it comes to funding, we have to focus really off the top, kind of our mandatory costs, whether that be deferred maintenance, specific programs that has been that has been instructed to us by statute, by law. And of course, like I mentioned before, employee compensation. If there are any other dollars that is more flexible, undesignated funds, and usually that has been attributed to enrollment growth or graduation initiative, things like that, that it goes through our own budget process of within the University Budget Committee. We have the University Budget Committee, UBC, in which they are able to review university priorities and make recommendations on how dollars should be spent in the future. So I just want to thank you all for joining. It's only been about 30 minutes, so kind of a shorter budget lunch and learn, but I hope, you know, this information was very helpful and we can open up to any questions that the group and the audience may have. I'm looking at the chat. Are we still going to absorb the initial cut we were required to for 25-26? Currently, the plans are to stay the course. And if there are, you know, that's kind of just we have the information that we got from yesterday, and we have to take the information that we have. But staying the course is the current plan right now, and if there are additional dollars that we receive, it would have to go through the process to making sure that university priorities are met. And things that we have to focus on truly is that even with the reductions that we've made, that we've closed the gaps that we've currently had already kind of absorbed. So making sure that that's being addressed as well. Will the slides be made available? Yes, we're going to post the slides and the video recording on our website. Thank you. Any other questions? Based on timeline, when will specific departments know their budgets for 25, 26? Unfortunately, I mean, and Debbie can answer this too, but unfortunately we don't know the final budget until July. Currently the planning is, you can reach out to your division fiscal officer to based off of the planning up until now, what your specific department budget is. However, final won't be known until we get the final budget in July. Any other questions? Yes. New comment?
Just wanted clarification in terms of process. So if the final word is going to come to us in July regarding the budget, are we anticipating some sort of a number from the chancellor's office before July also, or everything will just be on hold till July?
Yeah, we do expect a number from the chancellor's office prior to July. They do, and I have been told that they're going to be sending a preliminary budget memo of what that would look like. Also, in terms of what costs we need to consider when it comes to the budget. But yes, we do expect to get an idea of what that number will be before July.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there planned GSI or unionized folks based on the new contracts with STEPS? From what I'm aware of is that all collective bargaining units are out for bargaining and collective bargaining right now. So the contracts are open for the 25-26 year. And I kind of going with that would have to go with our labor relations group on what details are within those negotiations. So nothing is planned or set as of yet, but I know that's open right now. There was a question, Deb, is there a website to see where the university's spending priorities are? I know that when all of our spending priorities are kind of based on the strategic plan. Deb, I'm not sure if you want to kind of emphasize on or expand on that.
If you just key in CSUDH UBC or University Budget Committee, you'll be able to see any priorities and everything that the UBC has talked about on that website.
Oh yes, thank you, Deb.
I want to make sure too we're because your response there, Nick, was spot on, but Nate puts another spin on this. Nate, do you want to clarify that new contracts with STEPS? Is there, because I know that there is some agreement with the CSUEU as far as STEPS is concerned, but I just want to make sure we were addressing your question there because GSI and STEPS are two different salary changes but I just want to make sure we're addressing your question there.
Thank you, Deb. I think because with CSU EU with I guess the new steps, it's relatively new to me. So just wanted, and I didn't know if that was contingent upon budget or was that just an automatic things that folks should be expecting?
Yeah, there's a couple of things here. I don't know if Monica is on the line, but she can probably or Ake can probably do a lot much more articulate job as far as expressing exactly what that means for CSUEU. CSUEU negotiated in the previous agreement with respect to the steps for the new classifications, right? So, and there's two things with that. One is they would get a step increase at the newest step for their new classification, right? The first step at their classification. So those that have been reclassed because they went through that exercise would automatically, number one, potentially be moved over to the first step of that classification outside of the increase. And then the other piece was just the step and column increases as well. And that does depend on whether or not the compact is funded. That first one is with the reclassification, that one has to be funded by the campuses, and that is not something that's included in these mandated costs. So the campuses, again, this is part of the gap that the campuses will have to look at as they get ready to fund some of these. But a regular GSI has not been negotiated for any of the unions thus far. Monica, again, you could probably say that much better than I can, but if you want to chime in on that.
I did know that that was spot on. In fact, there are several of the collective bargaining agreements that either have full contract bargaining, like CFA, UAW, UAPD, and there are a few that have salary reopeners. But for CSUEU, considering that was the question, for CSUEU, we don't yet have the details as to where employees will be placed in terms of their salary. There are two things that are being considered, and that is the closest step or a target step. Teamsters was already moved into the implementation last year. And so now we're just looking at CSUEU with an October 1st deadline. At the moment, we're currently looking at classifications only. And until we get a little more information in terms of how the budget will go for this coming fiscal year, we'll have a better understanding as to how the employees will be placed in terms of their step.
And again, that was not included or funded basically because there wasn't enough funds to do so. So if we can't close that gap, campuses will have to make sure that they're, closing that gap.
Another question, are we going to stay the course with the 8% or 3%? I think we're still waiting on a lot of information, so staying on the course of the initial plan, but being aware and getting as much estimation of what those implications are if it does finalize to be at 3%. So yeah.
Yeah, and one of the discussions that we've been having with the budget team is really kind of the campus did a lot of work in closing some of the gaps, right? Because the one thing that we have to do is make sure that we have a balanced budget going into the next fiscal year. So there's been a lot of work that's been done. And again, until we get some of these final numbers from the chancellor's office and from the reductions that we've made on the campus, we probably won't know that until sometime in June.
Any other questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Just thank you for taking your lunch break and joining us for this budget lunch and learn. Thanks, Deb and Ryan, for assisting on this as well.
And I'm sure, Nick, I can speak for everyone, not just in this screen, because I know we had up close to 100 people, but CSUDH would like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for all of the hard work that you have put into this campus. And we could not have made it through these tough times coming off of the pandemic, all of the vortex that we've been involved in, just making sure that these numbers are you know, the integrity of the numbers and just the way that you presented it with passion and with integrity. We can't thank you enough. We are so grateful that you said yes to DH. Pomona is lucky. I'm still upset with them, but they're really lucky to get you back. And we thank you for staying with the CSU because you have been so valuable. And we, you know, we love you as our budget director because you're not only a stellar human being, but you know this work. And so we really appreciate you.
I really appreciate that. Thank you for making me a little blush a little bit, so I appreciate it. And of course, like I can't I'm gonna miss working for you, Deb, as well. I don't want it to be like a sob fest, but it's kind of it's very, very bittersweet, and I really do hate to not be under your leadership as well. So I wish the best to this campus as well. I'll be around. I'm still in CSU, so I hope to see you all soon for sure.
Don't change your cell phone number because I'll still be calling you. But we appreciate you. And thank everyone for spending their lunch hour.
Yes.
We wish we had all of the details worked out, but we just got this information yesterday around 2 and 3 o'clock. So we were scrambling even later to make sure we put some information together, but we at least wanted to share what we know. So, and that's, you know, we're always trying to be as transparent as we can, but thank you for spending some of your lunch time with us. And as soon as we get additional information, we'll try to plan for some more time where we can get together and talk.
Thank you all, everybody. Have a great afternoon and
Thank
commencement
you.
weekend. So thank you for joining.
Take care.
Bye-bye.